Welcome back to Carneades.org, and welcome to video number 102. This is going to be the third and final video in our series on doubting I think, therefore I am, Descartes' famous Cogito, ergo sum. If you haven't checked out the two previous videos, doubting the I think part and doubting the I think, therefore part, you should check those out now. This video is going to be on the conclusion, the I exist part of I think, therefore I am. If you've watched the other two videos, you would know that we've already doubted the premise and the validity of this argument, so we don't really need to offer an objection for the conclusion if we take this as an argument. However, if we just take it as two indubitable statements, the statement I think and the statement I exist, then we should offer something of an objection to it. Remember, we're not here proving that you don't exist. We're proving that it's possible, or showing that there might be a way that you can doubt your own existence. Or perhaps that you don't know for certain that you do exist. In order to do this, we're going to draw on something we did a video series on right before this series, called Personal Identity. If you haven't checked out that series, it might be a good idea to do that now. Personal identity is basically what makes a person identical to themselves. In that video series, we talked about the psychological approach to personal identity and the somatic approach to personal identity. I offered some pretty damning objections to both approaches, so I would say that we are left now without a really good, solid understanding of what personal identity could consist in, because both of those approaches seemed to, in many ways, fail to meet our understandings of personal identity. In order to understand where we're going to go next, we will return to our original problem of identity, which is the problem of Theseus's ship. If you haven't watched that video, it's a great one. You should watch it. So, what we're going to say now is maybe the reason we're having a problem with Theseus's ship isn't that it's a problem of our identity, but rather our problem with the concept of a ship. Maybe there isn't really a such thing as a ship. Sure, it's nice for us to call things that float on the water and people can sail in a ship, but all this ship really is just a bunch of parts. It's a bunch of planks, it's a mast, it's some sails. It's nothing more than that. It's a bunch of separate objects that we've happened to put together and call a ship, but that doesn't make it a separate thing. It's just a bunch of planks that happen to be next to each other. The reason Theseus' ship poses a problem is because there never really was a ship in the first place. It was just a collection of parts. And we can talk about the identity of each plank, but we can't talk about the identity of a ship because the ship didn't really exist. There might be a question of whether we can talk about the identity of the planks because those are actually comprised of a bunch of molecules, and what if we replaced all the molecules? That's a whole different argument. The point is that the parts are all that there is. There's not some bigger thing here. So, maybe this can work with the body of a person. All you are in your body is a bunch of bones, muscles, tissues, and such. You're a bunch of molecules. The somatic approach struggles for this very reason, because some single body, some organism never really existed. Our physical forms are nothing but a bunch of molecules, chemical reactions that just happen to be near each other. If we take this view that this kind of personal identity doesn't really exist, then we're more skeptical of it, things start to make a lot more sense. Because we don't need to deal with all these problems of personal identity. We just say, we don't know a sufficient way to explain personal identity, so it doesn't really work. These two explanations, however, don't really work for what Descartes is talking about, because he's not talking about the physical body. He's talking about the mind. Descartes was a substance dualist. He believed that the world is made of two substances, body and mind. And he's already called into doubt his physical body. So when he makes his claims of I exist, he's talking about his mind existing. Hence the whole I think part of that. Therefore, in order to doubt our existence, we have to call into doubt our mind and our body. Well, we've already called into doubt our body's existence, both through Descartes' arguments and through the argument I just presented above. But what about our mind? Well, what are the parts of our mind? Well, to get an understanding of this, we're going to go through a gentleman by the name of David Hume and take a look at his understanding of the mind to see how we can kind of piece apart the mind. Hume says that the mind is made of ideas and impressions. Impressions are things that are forceful to the mind. They're like emotions and sense perceptions. Ideas, on the other hand, are less forceful to the mind. They're memories or imaginings. Basically, they're us remembering previous impressions, or imagining new things by combining impressions we may have seen. Basically, according to Hume, all our mind is just a combination of a bunch of ideas and impressions. And just as if our mind is nothing but a combination of ideas and impressions, just as we could get rid of the ship by just saying that it's a bunch of separate pieces, we could get rid of the mind by simply taking it apart. It's a bunch of ideas. Other people have had those ideas. You don't always have the same ideas. There's nothing that's holding those ideas together, making it a mind. There's nothing that's bringing those impressions together, making it a mind, because we have no concept of personal identity. There's no one person that's thinking it, because we're trying to use the idea of mind to define that one person. Just as the body or the ship is nothing but a set of parts that happen to be near each other, the mind is nothing but a set of ideas and impressions. There is no I to exist. Now, you may not be convinced by the argument that there is no person, there is no I, but it seems to at least be possible. It seems to at least be possible that perhaps we were nothing but just this combination of ideas and impressions, that you are nothing but maybe a snapshot of memories or a snapshot of images that exist for 1 second and are gone, and that that snapshot has nothing to do with each other. Perhaps it's just a bunch of random objects that are in a picture. Maybe you just came into existence in this instant with all of your memories, and you'll disappear in the next instant. Perhaps there are hundreds of other people that have had the same impressions and ideas that you're having right now. How then are they yours? Even if Hume's argument is unattractive, it doesn't seem that any of the other views on personal identity seem satisfactory. They don't seem to stand up to what we want out of a view of personal identity. So, it seems our best route is to say we can't offer a view of personal identity. We have yet to see one that is sufficient. So, until a burden of proof is met for believing in personal identity or even persons, there's no need to include things like I in our ontology. We don't need to include people that exist. So, we don't need to have I exist as something we believe in, because no one's offered a sufficient proof of personal identity. I'll leave you with a joke about Descartes and the Cogito. Descartes walks into a bar. The bartender asks him if he'd like a drink. Descartes says, "I think not," and disappears. Watch this video and more at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.